Hi there, I'm Peter Spencer reporting for Cornwall stress-free television at Bude. Normally it's a pretty tranquil sort of place. There's pleasure boats for people to play on, a floating restaurant and dear little ducks plopping around. But that is about it, normally. However, every now and then something does happen that's worth watching. See these stonking great gates behind me? Cop this. This marks the beginning of the new season. It enables the flotilla of local boats laid up for the winter to head for their moorings on the seaside of the lock gates. It's the same ritual, in reverse pretty obviously, at the end of the season, and at times at points in between, if someone wants to get in or out. So, Paul, is it very difficult to open these gates?
This is the only hand-operated sea lock in the country, so I require a minimum of 8 volunteers to do it, as well as me. We usually get a volunteer crew of about 15. This is the first one of the season, so it's always a bit hairy.
Of course. And tell me, does it ever go wrong?
No, not yet. I mean, sometimes they're more difficult than others, but at the moment, touch wood, we've not had any problems.
Is it fun doing this?
Yes, yeah. Hard work, but fun, yes.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
All right,
you're
welcome. Okay.
Do you love this canal?
Of course we do, yeah. There's only one in the country what goes out to sea. So.
No, I've lived on this canal for years and years. I love it. I'd hate to see it go.
It's like a little party.
Yeah. There's camaraderie and fun.
Lovely.
That's the poor side of it. We're the dark side. We're the top crew.
Of course you are. I mean, they're rubbish, aren't they?
Specialist society.
There's always double the amount on that side.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
in the lieu of the wind over
They're
there.
not very strong over there.
A lot of prepping went into today's events. Craning the boats onto the water was, relatively speaking, the easy bit. Though some look a jolly sight heavier than others, it has to be said. But before the lock gates could be opened, the ground had to be laid and dug up, quite a lot of it, especially by the gates. Otherwise, the build-up of sand during the winter means they simply wouldn't budge at all. Now, a week ago I was with Chris Jewell, a trustee of the Bude Canal and Harbour Society and top man to talk us through it all. So how much do they have to dig out from the sea level?
Well, they need to take out enough to be able to ensure the gates will operate. But having looked at it, I would imagine it's several feet of sand and stones to be removed to allow the gates to operate.
Yeah, and they're pretty heavy-duty things you got there. So in total, there's going to be tons of sand.
Oh
isn't
yes,
there?
I would imagine so.
Yeah. And
Yes.
what do they do with it?
Well, they put it back on the beach, don't they?
They put it back on the beach.
Yes.
So, having done that, then the next stage is they will actually open those gates when they physically can.
Yes.
And what sort of numbers of boats go floating in and out?
Well, this time of the year, there are several boats in on Lower Wharf, out of the water, which need to be put back in the water. And then on the day that the harbour master decides, which has probably been about a week or so, subject to the conditions, they'll come down the canal, they'll fill the sea lock up with water at the appropriate level, open the canal gates, the boats will go into the lock chamber, they'll close the canal gates and then let the water out of the sea lock so that they can open the outer gates when it's the same level as the tide outside, and then they'll go to sea or go out to the moorings or whatever they want to do.
And are they mainly pleasure boats, or are they working boats, or half and half?
Some boats, some men do actually fish from here on a regular basis. They're licensed to fish. They have quotas and all that nonsense. But there are a lot of local guys who do it just for pleasure, go out and do a bit of fishing, get away from the missus. And
I didn't hear you say that.
yes, you did.
So at the beginning of the season, they open it pretty much every year, and at the end of the season, I imagine the same.
They bring them back. Yes,
Yeah.
they come back in.
But during the summer, they open it more often. Yeah?
It's as and when needed. We do get visiting boats from time to time, and that's never known how many. You may get, one of the local boats has got a problem with an engine or anything, and he may need to come in to do repairs. They'll endeavour to cater for that, subject to the tides.
Sure. And the major sort of sand operation now is, that's because it's been many months since it's last been.
Yes.
Yeah. In the middle of the year, middle of the summer, I take it they haven't got to dig out so much sand.
If you get a lot of heavy seas, it'll get sanded up again.
Yeah.
So sometimes in the summer, you can cure that purely by flushing the lock chamber by using water from the canal.
And if all that sounds ingenious, that's because it is, but it's nothing to what they got up to here when this canal was built a couple of centuries ago. When the writer Oscar Wilde visited Niagara Falls, he joked they'd be more impressive if they went the other way. But actually, that's something like what did happen here back in Christ Jewell. As I understand it, there's a couple of miles of canal in the conventional sense.
Yes.
And 35 miles in total?
35.5 miles in total as built. The first 2 miles goes to Heel Bridge, which is 2 miles up the valley from here. That was basically a broad canal. Average sort of depth would be about 4 feet, because it did used to take large barges carrying sand as well, through the 2 inland locks up to Heel Bridge, and then that's when the tugboats would come into their own. You did have tugboats that went up to Heel Bridge as well, but from Heel Bridge on to navigate the rest of the canal, the 6 inclined planes, then the tugboats that's what they were designed for.
Sure.
On a narrower, shallower canal.
And the idea was to get this lime-rich sand from
Lime-rich sand, yes.
and to the fields where they use it to fertilise the fields.
It was to make a commercial enterprise out of an centuries-old practice of allowing to take sand off the beach.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no charge for the sand. The sand was free. What you paid if you were a farmer or a trader or whatever, what you paid was the cost of the labour to load the sand initially into the trucks that went out onto the beach on rails, and also the offloading at various points. That's what you, as a trader, would pay, and a trader would up the price a bit to a farmer at so much per hundredweight.
And did they on the way back, did they sometimes take farm produce back?
Well, yes, like all carriers, you want to be making money both ways. Yes.
And the point about tugboats is that
Tugboats,
they
yes.
actually got wheels on them, so they could drag them up hills.
Yeah, so they could travel on rails up hills, yes,
Yeah.
up and down hills.
Yeah. And that was
the inclines.
a maximum 460 feet, am I right in saying that?
The maximum height of the system, the highest point on the system is about 430 odd feet.
430 feet, okay.
Yes.
I mean, it was an extraordinary engineering undertaking
Yes.
200 years ago, wasn't
Yes.
it? And when they had to drag them up these hills, they must have used extremely heavy-duty chains.
The incline planes operated on water-powered endless chains, so that when you got to the bottom of the incline plane, the tugboat would be hooked on to the endless chain, and then the power would be put on, and the chain would go around, and off you would go up the rails to the top, back into the canal, and then the next one, and the next one.
And these tugboats would be full of sand.
Yeah,
and
mainly sand. Yes.
And they'd be pretty heavy, I would think.
A tugboat is, in its own right, is probably about a ton in weight at least, I would think.
Just without any load
without
in
anything
it.
in it. It must be at least a ton.
And so you're going to double that, I imagine, for the
Well,
sand.
they were made to carry about 5 tons of sand.
So 6 tons in total.
Yes.
Wow.
Travelling in mainly in trains of 4, sometimes 6, pulled by 1 horse.
I can imagine that sometimes things went
Well,
wrong.
yeah, things went wrong.
Yeah, like chains broke and
Chains break, yeah.
and then
yeah.
they're tumbling down the hill.
Yes.
And then I imagine at this stage, again, some of the language deployed might have been, you would use the word appropriate.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just picturing it.
I mean, the crucial part of the system was the largest incline at Hobbicut, because if you couldn't get past Hobbicut, then the whole system fell down, because that's only like sort of 3 or 4 miles inland from here. So boats who want to go past there or come in either direction, coming back to Bude or going out onto the rest of the system, if that system was out of action, then the whole thing just stopped.
Yeah, of course,
Basically.
I understand. And so you've got this 6 tons, it's being dragged up a hill.
Yeah.
It would take quite a few blokes to do that. I mean, I imagine there was, and you had chains, but how did they manage to make it happen?
Well, it's by the use of water power. With the underground water wheels, you have a water wheel driving the machinery, and the machinery drives this continuous chain that you just hook onto. And with the large one at Hobbicut, that's a system of what is commonly known as bucket in the well, which is a large cistern with about 15 tons of sand, sort of water in it. And when you're ready to go, you release that and it drops down the well, which is 225 feet deep. Start pulling the tugboats up the inclined plane. The face of the plane, that's the length that they travel along, is 925 feet. So it works out roughly, if you know your geometry, it's about a 1 in 4 slope.
So there we have it, 35 miles of it, ending up, as the man says, 430 feet above sea level. Little wonder when they were digging this canal out, it was regarded as one of the most unusual projects of its kind ever undertaken. Of course, there's only a couple of miles or so of towpath like this before we get to the really interesting bit, where the canal stops being a canal in the conventional sense. It's in a place called Heelbridge. It's up there somewhere. Bye. That was a bit of a schlep, but here we are finally at Heelbridge Wharf and Basin. The building behind me is called the Barge Workshop and Wharf, and I dare say they did fix a few boats in the olden days. It's now used as a museum workshop. I bet they've got some great stuff in there. Hello, Chris. Nice to see you again.
And you, yes, indeed.
So this is the fabled tugboat.
Yes, the tugboat.
How old is this, do you think?
Well, we're not exactly sure, but it would have been built during the, say, early 1800s. This has got a design change on it. The original boats had the wheels on the outside, and they found probably quite quickly that having wheels on the outside caused damage to the canal banks, causing leaks and all sorts of things. So they redesigned it, and all 4 wheels are actually set inside the side beams.
Sure, and we can see.
Yes, they're still there. They All four are on that boat, yes.
And they look pretty meaty, the wheels themselves. I suppose they had to be. I mean, considering its age, it's actually in pretty good nick, really, isn't it?
Yes. This was recovered from the Bude Canal in 1976 and resided in the Maritime Museum that used to be at Exeter City Quay.
I mean, the point about this is that it was only here that you had boats like this, wasn't it? Nowhere else in the country.
Well, there are other. The Roll Canal in North Devon, which is sort of roughly between Bideford and Torrington, was built by James Green after he finished this canal, and that's a tugboat canal, and they would have had boats probably quite similar to this.
But that's about it.
They do have. There are other places that used to have boats go up inclines, but they didn't used to go on wheels.
Sure, I mean, that's the whole point about the canal, is the fact that it was one of the most remarkable achievements of its time, wasn't it?
Yes, a bit of cutting edge technology at the time, and the boats would come into the boat bay at the bottom and they'd be hooked onto the continuous chain, and when things were ready the signal would go and the continuous chain would start moving and they would just be pulled up, wheels going up the tracks.
Must have gone wrong sometimes.
Yes.
And what did people say then, one wonders?
Well, wouldn't like to, I don't think they would have been very pleased.
Yeah.
It caused lots of problems, you know. I think the thing mainly wrong with the system here at Bude is that the technology of metals was not advanced enough. I mean, all the chains were wrought iron, so they're all right for, you know, quite strong for taking a bit of torque, but you don't want any juddering and sudden things, because they used to break. And then look out.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, if it's going down a hill, a 1 in 4 hill, a thing this weight.
Well, yes, apparently on each boat that went up the inclined plane, there would be someone on it. And he allegedly had a steel spike and a hammer that if the chain broke, what he had to do was to drive this spike, which was connected to the boat, into the face of the plane as a brake. Well, of course, you know, by the time you realised the chain is broke, you know, if you can imagine you've got a continuous chain which is under pressure, under torque, then shall we say, of about 5 or 6 tons pulling, and it snaps. The last thing you want to be doing is jumping out, sticking a steel spike in it, because you would get decapitated with it, because it would fly, wouldn't it?
The mind boggles.
Yes,
I mean, it was quite a dangerous job.
And of course, like on the big incline with the buckets, at Hobbicket, that was a slightly different system where big systems of water would be allowed to drop down the well shaft, and then that would drive all the machinery. The chains on holding the buckets would break. So then you'd have this water-filled container, which was either at the top or halfway down, wherever it was, would then finish its descent, and then not only do you have to repair the chains, you've got to get that
out
up. You know,
somehow.
It was a real that was a real weakness.
So when they were towed up these hills, I mean, how many would be towed at the same time?
Well, as far as we know, it would be one at a time.
Just because otherwise it really would have been asking too much.
Yes.
Notwithstanding accidents, the canal made money, lots of it, for well over half a century until things really did go wrong. Farmers stopped needing sand because someone figured out how to manufacture chemical fertiliser, and someone else brought railways to the region, a far easier way of shifting the stuff around.
So Bude Canal is a relic of a bygone age and a shadow of its former self. Still, it's a blinding piece of heritage and a great asset to the town. Visitors flock to it, and locals pretty much seem to love it too, from what I understand. No great surprise there. But remember, it is very much work in progress, so what of the future? Chris Jewell isn't after the crown jewels, so to speak, but naturally his outfit would like all the help it can possibly get. So we end more or less where we began, asking Chris what, in an ideal world, he'd liked the future to hold for this canal.
What we would like to see them do is to finish off the regeneration project that finished in 2009, because there are several bits of work done on the 2-mile section which you would only ever have done if you intended to have navigation. The bit that got left out because of funding issues, the bid was too big. And in reality, that is an investment in the local tourism infrastructure.
Yeah.
But, they're under pressure.
Sure. Of course they are. And even though on what you have now, are you proud of it?
Well, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, this canal is 200 years old next year.
And you're proud of what you guys have done to keep it alive?
Well, yes, we do. We do our best because it's important. I mean, I was my hometown.
Yeah.
It's not until you actually look at what was achieved 200 years ago.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
You love it.
Oh yeah, I love the Bude Canal indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Chris, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Bless
indeed.
you. Thank you.